Then they want to be able to answer questions such as, when do we sunset an older piece of equipment? Should we replace an older piece of equipment? What's the justification for that? When a plant manager calls in and says, I want to make an investment in a $1 million piece of equipment. Well, why? What data supports that? What justifies it?
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. As a plant manager or an executive responsible for the P&L of a manufacturing plant, you will need to make several decisions to improve your internal capacity. They could be adding more bodies, equipment, or adding a new location. Unfortunately, if you don't have data to substantiate them, it may feel as if you are investing money in improving your capacity, but not realizing tangible benefits. In today's episode, we have our guest, Dave Westrom, who describes the importance of understanding the true internal capacity for manufacturers and how that could assist with decision making in your plans. He also discusses how to go from point A to point B to create a data-driven plant and build a culture of continuous improvement. Finally, he shares several stories of manufacturers from his recent engagements where he improved the internal capacity. Let me introduce Dave to you. David Westrom is responsible for global business development at Machine Metrics. Dave has spent much of his career in executive team roles at innovative industrial Internet of Things companies. He has led business development organizations and driven a strategy at 3 IIoT startups that experienced successful exits, including most recently Thing Rocks, acquired by PTC, and Lighthammer, acquired by SAP. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hey, Dave, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And I am super excited to have you as well, just because the kind of experience that you bring in terms of the increasing the internal capacity of the manufacturing shop floor, that is going to be so fascinating for our listeners. Just to kick things off, Dave, do you want to start with your personal story and your current focus?
Yeah, sure. I'm responsible for business development at
Yeah,
Machine Metrics, which
yeah,
includes our key accounts, our strategic accounts,
yeah,
where our focus is on driving value around their key metrics, and increasing capacity is one of the top objectives of those customers. As a background, I have spent most of my career in the industrial automation, industrial software, enterprise software, and IoT markets in various business development, sales, and marketing roles. I was part of the executive team of a company called ThingWorks, which was an early pioneer in IoT prior to joining Machine Metrics. And before that, I was part of the exec team at a company called Lighthammer, which was acquired by SAP and became SAP's platform for IoT. So just a quick background, and again, my experience is really in this space, and happy to be here and look forward to the discussion.
Okay, amazing. So obviously your background is going to be super fascinating as we dig through your experiences in increasing the internal capacity, and I'm pretty sure you are going to have tons and tons of stories to share with our listeners. So before we do that, we have one of these standard questions that we ask every single guest, and that is going to be, Dave, your perspective on business growth.
Yeah, I believe that in what we see with customers, there's a number of facets and levels to this,
Yeah,
and one of the primary challenges around driving growth is simply being able to accurately measure it and baseline where a customer is. And we find that many of our customers in their manufacturing plants and their operations, they start their journey by collecting data manually. And
yeah,
oftentimes, when they're trying to measure growth or look at capacity, determine where they are, what they need, they're capturing manual data, and it's giving them a very poor baseline and poor picture.
yeah,
It's really a not a very strong foundation for continuous improvement. The data that they're capturing tends to be highly inaccurate.
yeah.
Often it's missing, and it really does not provide them with the foundation for being able to build out the processes, the automations, the things that they're going to need to drive capacity improvements and improvements in other key metrics as well.
Okay, so amazing background there. Obviously, we are going to be discussing overall in terms of how they can improve the performance of the shop floor. But just to set the stage and set the tone of the episode, do you want to define, especially if some of the manufacturer listeners, they might not be familiar with what exactly is capacity when I look at my shop floor? Some of our listeners are really SMB, so even though they sort of understand what you're talking about, but they might not be as familiar with the term. So when we look at the internal capacity, what are we looking at? If you have any specific stories that you might be able to share from your experience that might describe, okay, how the internal capacity matters for a manufacturing organization, how that can be improved, how the data that maybe they may be collecting at this point of time may not be as accurate to drive the continuous improvement. So, do you want to either share the story or just set the stage with that explanation?
Yeah, I could talk about a few things around that. We find that different customers will the metrics that they're measuring, the
Yeah,
metrics that they're trying to drive improvement around vary depending on the specific business they're in and what their specific objectives are. So some of our customers may focus more around utilization.
yeah,
Some may focus on things like part count. Some
yeah,
focus on OEE, and then there are other variations and variants of
yeah,
that basically make up the foundational piece. But ultimately, it comes down to what is the productivity of the plant? How do you improve that? What's available?
yeah,
And then it sort of bubbles up to questions around, if you're at capacity, are you really at capacity?
yeah,
Again, we find that we work with companies that believe they're capacity constrained, but the truth is they have a lot of available capacity. And when they were capturing data manually, there was a perception around key metrics that tended to be much higher than what it really was. So there's room for improvement there. Whereas companies that are at capacity will start to look at, okay, do we expand? Do we go out and buy more equipment? Do we
yeah,
add more people? And again, many cases we find that's not necessary
yeah,
once the baseline data is established and
yeah,
once a continuous improvement program is put in place to drive improvement around a lot of those key variables. So, being able to have a clear picture
Yeah.
and then really leveraging the data to drive continuous improvement versus versus leveraging again various opinions or manually captured data which may not be accurate. That's the key foundational aspect. But then it comes to looking at, okay, what do we need to change? What are the key drivers in the plant
Yeah.
that are gonna lead to improvement? What are the processes that need to be changed? And that varies. There's a wide range of examples, but it's it's leveraging the data, the machine asset data, to identify, prioritize, and then execute on continuous improvement initiatives. And again, if capacity is the key driver, and there's a view that there's a capacity constraint, then that's where the focus will be. And we see that mostly around our customers that are more high volume customers. A
Okay.
high volume, capacity constrained producer, any improvement in utilization, for example, drops right to their bottom line. So, in a continuous improvement journey, think of that as being the lowest hanging fruit. That's the one you're going to tackle first, because any improvement in that is going to be easily quantifiable.
Okay, so there are many different aspects here, right? So, as you correctly pointed out, number one, you need to know what you are measuring. And as much as we all want to think that data is going to provide us the objective picture, but these KPIs and the matrices that we are going to have could be extremely subjective. So, obviously, when we work in different industries, they all are going to have different baseline in terms of how they measure their capacity and the productivity. So one of the things that you mentioned is the high volume, right? So in case of high volume, that's going to be a very different manufacturing environment compared to, let's say, low volume, high mix manufacturing environment. So again, do you have, let's say, one or two stories that you might be able to share of, let's say, high volume and the low volume? What are the differences in terms of measuring their capacity? And if you have a story where if they were not measuring the right KPIs, and then you guys came in and then you coached them that no, 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 this is not the KPIs you should be measuring on, because that is actually leading you in a completely different direction. And because of that, you are thinking that probably you don't have enough capacity. You probably need to buy more machines or need to hire more people. But actually, the problem is somewhere else. So, do you have any specific stories that you might be able to share of different manufacturing environments?
Yes, many stories. I'll give you a few that I think may be relevant. For a high volume producer, we find that there's a lot of opportunity for productivity improvement just around, especially in medium to larger size plants, just around the time that it takes
Yeah.
to respond to different conditions in the plant. And some of these things are actually fairly simple, right? Where we have customers where if they get behind in production for whatever reason, the time that it takes to notify the right people and get them to the line or the machine or the asset where they're having the problem is is prohibitive. I mean, in some cases, it's over an hour, right? And just by setting up an alert and a notification through the software can reduce that down to oftentimes just a couple minutes, where you're behind in production, an alert is triggered, a notification is sent, and that time is cut by 90% or more. So something that's, again, it sounds simple and obvious, but we see it with many customers where it's a challenge. The higher mix companies
Yeah.
tend to have multiple challenges, and with them, it's often, going back to my example earlier, a case of leveraging the data to identify where the focus should be, and where the priorities should be from a continuous improvement standpoint. So one example, we had a company that had multiple bottlenecks in their processes, had trouble identifying the bottlenecks, knew they had other issues, but they started leveraging machine metrics in one plant where they were having these problems, and they realized very quickly that their downtime was poor, but more specifically from the data, that their setup times were very bad. And even more specifically, drilling down further in the data, their tooling setups were were very poor. So they focused on that specifically. They re-engineered their processes around tooling setup. They were able to reduce their setup times by more than 50%. They actually retrained their operators. They ended up adding more operators, and most of our customers would go the other way, but in this case, they actually added operators, and they found they were able to reduce those setup times by more than 50%, which produced huge savings. They were then able to move their bottlenecks, which led to a subsequent initiative where they were able to reduce idle scheduling time by 98%, which was pretty substantial. They presented this to their executive team, and the reaction was, this is great. This saved us a lot of money, but what about our other plants? How much money are we losing because we're not doing the same thing? So they ended up rolling machine metrics out very rapidly to their other plants. They were able to do this within months, based on how our software is designed to automate a lot of the data capture and data transformation within a plant. So it's very easy to roll out without having to code and do other things. But other examples I could provide around capacity. We have customers with multiple plants that often will struggle with questions around where to make a product. If we have one customer where the primary plant is at capacity, new orders come in, they would start calling around to different plants saying, "Can you make this product? We just got this order." And the answer was always no, we're busy. Well, today they now have visibility across all their plants, all the way down to the machine asset level. They know where their capacity is. They know where the available capacity is. They understand the schedules in these plants. So now they don't call around asking questions. Now they call and they say, "You're going to make this product. We know, you have capacity here on these assets. We just got this order. You're going to make the product." So you can essentially, in this case, multiple plants become sort of one virtual plant with that visibility, the ability to see across the plants, measure capacity. We also have similar stories with companies that in the past had a certain view of their capacity, and based on that view would outsource their production. Now they're bringing that back in, because with machine metrics, with the data, they have better information and better data around what they're able to effectively produce, what their costs are, what the costs are of outsourcing to third parties. When they're able to free up capacity, they're able to bring that back in, but they're also able to make decisions around, are we more effective at making this product, or is there a contractor that's more effective? Really, who should be making the product, and what's the best mix or combination that's gonna have the most positive impact on our business?
Okay, so great stories, and obviously we like to hear great positive results. But, from my perspective, let's say if I'm the executive who's listening to this podcast right now, what I am really looking for is the story at one level, deeper level, right? So if you were to go down in any of these stories, so let's pick the first one. you mentioned that, you had multiple bottlenecks. So here I sort of have a sense that, there were a lot of problems in the plant. There were, issues with the setup time. There were issues with the downtime. But describe to me the product, the business model, why those bottlenecks were there in that story to begin with, and then describe the whole story, how you walked in, what were the initial analysis when you were at this plant, what were the outcome, did you have any surprises when you walked in this plant? Can you take the story at one level deeper?
Sure. So for that specific one, we're able to accurately measure baseline and enable improvement processes around those key metrics, whatever they may be. So being able to baseline and measure downtime, for example, many companies struggle with that, or they're doing it either manually, they're writing it down on paper, they're writing it on a board or whatever, and they don't have very accurate information. That information they're around downtime, around their cycle times,
Yeah.
depending on the business and what drives their business is directly tied to either their revenue, their profitability. I mean, cycle times, for example, oftentimes customers store that data in their ERP system. How did it get there? Who entered it in there? Who knows? It's different with every customer. How accurate is it? Well, how do you know how accurate it is? Well, once when you're automatically measuring, when you've automated the measurement of that on the machine through something like machine metrics,
Yeah.
now you're getting the actual data. How long is it taking you to make that part? How long is it taking you to make that product? And being able to then compare that with what you believe that cycle time actually is, that can be important. And if you're a business that's pricing your products based on that standard, that job standard, and it's not accurate, well, that most likely is directly impacting your profitability. You may be losing money on every job, or you may be non-competitive and losing business, right? So in terms of downtime, it's similar, and it directly ties back to capacity, right? You may believe you have certain available capacity, but if you have a huge amount of downtime and you can't account for what that is or what's causing it, and you have no idea how to re-engineer your processes or drive improvement around that, that's directly impacting your business. So the first thing is to be able to accurately baseline it and measure it, then establish process improvements and targets around improvement, be able to implement those processes, put them in place, and then measure the improvement. And then you don't just do that once, you just keep doing it. And that's really what continuous improvement is all about. You continuously drive more and more value around these key metrics based on what's important to your business. But if you can't accurately measure the key indicators and you don't have visibility into the processes, you're not going to get anywhere. And also, if you don't understand the magnitude of these, it's hard to also prioritize and focus on what's going to provide the most impact to the business. So, again, those are just a few areas. I could go even deeper if you like, but
obviously I understand the overall advantage of the automation. Obviously I want to do the automation as much as possible, but typically from my experience, if I look at my own plant right now, I don't know how to go from point A to point B. I understand, how to do the continuous improvement. I understand what is going to be the advantage of enabling continuous improvement in iPlan. I also understand how to basically set up the baseline, and not how, I mean, what is the importance of the baseline and how that is going to impact my business. But my challenge always is, what do I need to do from the process perspective, as well as if we are exploring some sort of tool that could be machine metrics, how to go from point A to point B is always going to be a challenge. The other point that you mentioned, okay, if you are entering this data manually in some sort of ERP system or whatever, then obviously that is not going to be as accurate as you would get, let's say, if you are automating this and you have some sort of sensor that is reading the data and that is actually providing the data to some sort of dashboard where I can read. I get it. But the problem is not as simple as that. That okay, you are not going to simply come to my plant and press this magic button called machine metrics and everything is going to work seamlessly. It doesn't work that way, right? So we need to know what kind of machines do I have in the plant, what kind of processes we have in the plant. So can you take this story at a deeper level so that our audience can relate, okay, how to go from point A to point B?
Sure. So, in terms of how we engage customers, our first of all, we're not a consulting company. We provide a industrial Internet of Things platform, a very unique platform that allows our customers to connect to and capture consumable data from literally any type of machine asset, and to do that in a matter of minutes or hours, depending on the types of machines, the number of machines. We provide within the platform packaged applications that allow that data to be consumed automatically, allow our customers to get to value quickly, so that when we work with our customers, they're able to focus on continuous improvement right at the beginning, not on having to write code to make the data consumable, which is what we see across the industry, where companies will spend months, if not years, just trying to get to a point where they have consumable data where they can then begin to focus on solving their business problems. Our whole approach is we've automated all that so that the data is consumable through applications immediately. Our customers can then leverage their own domain expertise to solve problems within their manufacturing plants. They can also leverage their domain expertise to expand, extend, and build on top of our platform. So not just leveraging those base applications we provide, they can leverage other applications, they can build their own, they can tie into other systems. So the number of use cases, the number of value opportunities are really limitless, right? So we come in and we'll focus on the low-hanging fruit, the areas that will have the most impact the quickest, the ones that are the most obvious. And typically those tend to revolve around, again, key business drivers, like for a high volume, low mix plant that's capacity constrained. We know utilization is going to be key, and the utilization improvement drops right to the bottom line. And our customers will typically see a 10 to 15% improvement in utilization, usually in the first couple months. And most of that comes just from providing better visibility, accurate data, and some fairly straightforward notifications and alerts like the ones I described earlier. So that's the easy stuff, right? But then the customer, through their domain expertise, through their continuous improvement teams, or through consultants they work with, will continue to drive value throughout the life cycle of ownership. And our whole approach is to work with them to ensure that they continue to get value over time. But again, that comes from the expertise of the customer. So many of our the stories, the value attainment that we talk about, they come from our customers. They come from our customers and the ways they've leveraged the data, the tools, the applications that we provide to improve their operations.
So let's take this problem from a different perspective. So let's say if you have the machine metric solution, which is phenomenal, amazing, but is that going to be fit in every single situation? Or there are going to be manufacturing situations where machine metrics is not going to be fit and it could be overkill?
Yeah, so we focus on discrete manufacturers. So we focus on companies that make parts, components, complete products. So in typically those fall into the following industries: automotive, all the tiers, aerospace, industrial, med device, oil and gas to some extent, and there are a few others, but primarily companies that are making parts or products where again the key metrics are around the things we've spoken about earlier. Our applications enable those measurements. Our diagnostic tools enable the analysis of those and the automation of the processes around that. We sell to the manufacturers, where the focus is around improving productivity and improving the operations. We also work with machine builders and their distributors who, from a service provider perspective, want to better service the machine assets that they provide to their customers. So because we're a cloud-based offering, we're able to enable that access for the machine builders and their distributors who are servicing the machines as well. That also enables use cases around improved maintenance, among others. But essentially, our customers typically have many different types of machine assets in their plants, and they want to be able to connect to all of them, not just a few of them, but all of them. And they want a complete picture of their operations and all of those assets. They want a common data structure and a common user experience across all the assets. So regardless of the make, model, age of the machine, the control system of the machine, older machines may not have control systems. They want to be able to connect to those machines and have consumable data. Then they want to be able to answer questions such as, when do we sunset an older piece of equipment? Should we replace an older piece of equipment? What's the justification for that? You know, when a plant manager calls in and says, I want to make an investment in a $1 million piece of equipment. Well, why? What data supports that? What justifies it? You know, you may have an older asset that runs perfectly well. Or we have customers that are asking questions like, why is this machine at this plant with this operator 20% more efficient and productive than the same machine in a different plant with a different operator? Being able to look across the assets and do comparative metrics, and again, look at the processes and determine what are the best practices and how do we leverage those best practices across machine assets, across lines, across plants. That's how, again, just some of many examples of how data is being leveraged. Maintenance is another area. I mean, we have starting to expand across the digital thread and look at other systems that our customers leverage. I mean, we have customers that have invested, for example, in CMMS systems, where there's a vision around maintaining, optimizing the maintenance of equipment assets. But how do you optimize maintenance if you don't know how long a machine's been running, or what the load is on the machine, or other factors? You're still maintaining your equipment based on a schedule. And so, investments in some of these systems and then not being able to realize the vision or realize the full value of those investments because the real-time machine asset data hasn't been consumed by those systems. Again, other examples of use cases and challenges that our customers face that we are able to help them solve through machine metrics.
Okay, amazing. That's it for today, Dave. Do you have any last minute closing thoughts or advice for our listeners?
I would say that everything starts with accurate data from the assets, and the assets for a manufacturer are the machine assets, the people assets, and the system assets. And how do you orchestrate all of those and leverage those to optimize your operations, and especially your manufacturing operations? That's really where the opportunity is. We believe that we're in the very early stages of this opportunity. In the past, companies have gone down different paths and have tried different approaches, different technologies with various degrees of success. We believe that the connection to the machine assets, the creation of consumable data to facilitate these processes and to facilitate the optimization of the manufacturing facilities is something that it's something that we've automated and we've made easy. And it's something that, again, in the past, companies have spent years. There's also a lot of legacy out there that we see companies struggling to maintain and support. So our approach is to make that easy and to facilitate the opportunity to drive improvements in capacity and the other metrics that we've mentioned through the data and through the insights provided by the applications that we provide, along with the tools and applications of other companies that we partner with. The goal is to get to value as quickly as possible and to do it in a way that's continuous. So value attainment early on, rapid value attainment, but then rapid continuous value attainment through the life cycle. That's our focus. And the examples we discussed today are just a few of many.
Okay, amazing. And my personal takeaway from the conversation is going to be, unless you have that baseline, unless you have accurate way of capturing the data, you are not going to know where you are in terms of your capacity. So before you are going to order the new equipment or hire new people, make sure that you understand your internal capacity. On that note, Dave, I really want to thank you for your time. This has been a great episode.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Dave, head over to machinemetrics.com. It's machinemetrics.com. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. If anything in this podcast resonated with you and your business, you might want to check other related episodes, including the interview with Martin Davis, who discusses the strategies to improve your manufacturing facilities' capacity and increase the overall equipment effectiveness of your equipment. Also, the interview with Mike Nager, who discusses the organizational metrics and KPIs that completely ignore the cost savings opportunities available through control and policies. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.